is we're going to kind of have a, group therapy session, encounter group, brainstorm, to use a word. John, hi, thank you for being here, our designated Republican.
Designated Republican, yes.
But basically what we're doing, we have a panel here, and we're going to have a discussion among ourselves for, 20 minutes or so. But we got an hour, and everybody in this room should be part of this conversation. We're all in shock. I think that's a given. Even the Trump campaign didn't expect to win. Nobody expected this outcome. So, but we're not, I'm hoping that what we can focus our conversation on, since we are Techonomy, and since we're believers in tech, and since we have, a unique opportunity to focus in on this issue of what do these results mean for tech? That's what I really want to hear as much about as possible. And when I say tech, I mean the tech industry, I mean tech investment, I mean tech use in government, I mean the concept of tech as a tool for global and national and regional and city and personal progress. All those things. How are any of those things affected, changed, improved, diminished because of what's just happened? And frankly, anything else you want to talk about, because you're really entitled to do whatever you want. And I'm a pretty open-minded guy, as sometimes to a fault. But let me just quickly introduce who's up here with me, because I'm super excited about having them all three. John Chen, CEO of BlackBerry, a longtime friend of Techonomy's and of mine, who's a longtime CEO. He gets a lot of credit for trying to turn around BlackBerry, and he's done a pretty darn good job. And he knew it was going to be tough. Prior to that, he'd been at Sybase and did an excellent job there. You were born in Hong Kong, and been in the U.S. for most of your life.
Right.
But John is also, he has a really interesting perspective because he's been, in the course of his career, extremely deeply involved in China. He was the chairman or the president, or whatever they call it, the Committee of 100, which is the 100 most eminent Chinese American business people, and you've done a lot to try to facilitate dialogue between the U.S. and China. So that's just background in addition to your managerial skills and the fact you are a Republican. But did you support Trump? I'm just curious.
I can't tell you now.
You can't tell me now? Okay.
Yeah, now.
I'd rather think that you did anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. But in any case, you're a Republican. You're not ashamed to say that, and I'm not embarrassed to admit that you are, or even if I were. In fact, I don't even think it matters that much. Next to him is Dave Morgan, who is another very close friend of Techonomy and of mine, who is the CEO of Simulmedia, a very, very successful New York-based advertising technology company that focuses in on targeted advertising on video and television, which is a business he started after two successive internet ad targeting businesses to bring sort of an internet ad targeting mindset to television, where the lion's share of dollars were still spent and are still spent in advertising. And he's done an amazingly good job. Techonomy was actually located in Simulmedia's office for our first 2.5, 3 years. But his company's grown so much, they had to kick us out. Now they've outgrown that space, and they're in a huge space on Park Avenue and 28th Street. Finally, Tony Scott, somebody else who I've known an awfully long time, who is now the CIO of the United States in the Office of the President. It's part of OMB, right? Tony was the CIO at General Motors. He's been the CIO at Disney. He was the CIO at Microsoft. What am I missing? What else did you do?
Bristol Myers Squibb and VMware.
VMware, yeah. So there you go. He's really got an eminent history as a leader. Why I had this? I think I have. I don't need to. He's got an eminent history as a corporate technologist and now a government technologist. And so I'm pleased that he's here, because he's inside the current power structure. And I think what happens to the power structure in general is one of the questions we have to ask. But having said all that to introduce you, anybody can say anything to start, because I have no questions written. I just want to I didn't know how to prepare for this because we didn't know what would happen. So what do you think happened yesterday, Tony? That's a good way to start, yeah.
Well, I think we're still finding out. I think some of the analysis is obviously obvious that, there was a big sort of surge in parts of the country that nobody saw coming and predicted at the scale. Largely people who felt anger and being left out, and I think a lot of the analysis is saying, wanted to say we want change. And so, we'll see. Our office is prepared for a change no matter who was going to be the next president, and that's where we're focusing our efforts. And just to go to one of your questions, I think no matter who's president, they're inheriting a government that's very different than the one that was there 8 years ago. It's beginning the road and on the way to digitization. And I think that's a relentless journey that is unstoppable no matter who's president. So there's lots of policies and so on that, you can argue about on lots of other issues. But this relentless digitization of government and engaging with citizens in a different way than we did, 4 years ago or 8 years ago, I think just continues and probably accelerates.
But as a congenital tech optimist, who really is part of that mindset, are you any less optimistic about tech's role in society and in American society as a result? Do you worry? Is anything you think fundamentally shifted about what how tech can be employed to make the world better?
Well, I think there's a couple of things that we're really coming to grips with. One is, there's a couple of paradigms that we're going to have to probably get rid of and sort of think about differently. One is the metaphor of the org chart as the design template for how technology gets implemented. So any organization where you take and look at the org chart and look at the infrastructure and the applications and they're one and the same, you're in trouble and you have to blow that up. It's true in the federal government, it's true in companies, it's true in the way that we procure and want services from government and so on. Like today, you have to know way too much about how government is organized, and its org structure to go find the right website to then go do the things that you want to do. And that's going to blow up in probably the next administration or shortly thereafter. It started to blow up under the Obama administration. But it's true of companies as well. It's true of whole industries. So that's one paradigm that I think is going to have some significant effect on how we think about everything. And the other one is, this is more hardware and software, but we've had this paradigm that everything should interoperate with everything else. And that ease of interoperation has been the kind of main design criteria for everything we do. And there's a new world coming with Internet of Things and so on that says, yeah, interop is easy, but should I interop? Should I, engage with this thing? Do I know what it really is? Is it safe? Is it performing the way it should be? And so on. And that changes everything about how we interact with technology. And we'll have ideas about technology that's safe and, good to use, and we'll have, refined ideas about technology that's not safe based on that interaction, and government's going to play a role in that. So I think these are just two of the really important things.
But the election results don't change any of that for you.
I think it's relentless. You can look at every industry and see the effect of digitization on that industry. Take media, take healthcare, you pick any industry, and this relentless digitization journey, leveraging technology, is unstoppable.
Dave, I can tell you have something to say.
Yeah, I think, as you know, my perspective is, I live in Manhattan. I've done 3 tech startups, venture-backed, and sold 2 of them. I grew up, though, in a small coal town in northern Appalachia in western Pennsylvania. Maybe 10 or 15% of my high school went to college, 25% went to the military. On my Facebook, there was no question to them who was winning the election. Including those that were college educated. It was no question whatsoever to them. To me, I was surprised. And, I think, I've been part of, for the last 20 years, this unique, special innovation economy bubble where we can access capital, we can implement it, we can hire very diverse work populations, we can live in New York, we cannot have to deal with a lot of other people. And clearly there's a massive disconnect between where I'm from and where I am today, and not understanding each other. And I think that became clear. I mean, I was thinking about it just as we were talking. I mean, the year before me in high school was someone who became the chief scientist of the Cape Kennedy Center for NASA, and my brother was a Carnegie Mellon, now sort of Navy spook engineer. So the people that had tech left. Our town collapsed because of the steel industry and the loss of coal and the loss of fire brick clay. So, I think that, and we don't worry about that, and we aren't aware of that in Manhattan, or when I'm at tech conferences or banking conferences and these people. And clearly that mattered. And I think that, what I worry about that will change is I think that there's no question that a lot of what we do is because we are given a lot of extra room to operate in this economy than was given 30 years ago. Access to capital, regulatory issues, an awful lot of things, taxation issues, immigration issues, that could easily be taken away and without legislation. I mean, I used to be a lobbyist in the industry. And so those things worry me a lot, because without an understanding between those two polar groups, it's very easy. And we saw what the Justice Department did to Microsoft and really changed it quite a bit. What's going on to Google and others in Europe right now.
Okay. Well, I just came back from Asia last night to make this. So
Thank you.
And
At least APEC wasn't happening.
when I landed, it was about 10 o'clock or so. I got in the car, p.m., and of course, I've been off the grid for 12 hours, and I heard what was being broadcast, and it was before, Pennsylvania was called, and it was quite shocking, really. You look at the map, it's quite shocking. But I think it really, in thinking back a little bit, I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of analysis going to be done for the next 30, 60, 90 days, or even years to come. I think when thinking back, there's one thing that we that live on bi-coastal in the tech industry have missed completely, is the whole concept of jobs. And so what is loud and clear to me was they're going to try to return the jobs. And if you listen to, and I stayed up long enough to listen to the Trump acceptance speech, he went straight to infrastructure building, which is, of course, the Democrats' platform. And he was smart enough to know, or whatever the advisor might be, was smart enough to know that in order to fulfill the promises to Missouri and Iowa and Wisconsin and everybody else, you have to create jobs that matches the certain level of skills and the know-how. So he's talked about the auto, and you talk about infrastructure, and I think I myself for once I completely underestimated that power. Although everybody's just focused on how he delivers and what he said about building the wall and stuff. So that this is just to go back to the first statement you asked. What do you think happened and why it happened? It was obviously shocking to most people.
It is interesting on infrastructure, though, pertinent to our themes. He doesn't really seem to understand that infrastructure includes digital infrastructure. Whenever he talks about it, he talks about, did he say it last night? No, he always talks about roads. Even if you go to his website, there's a thing about infrastructure. And there is something in there about communications. There's one word, communications, or maybe it says telecommunications. But it doesn't really encompass what we know to be critical.
But is it because of the capability? In other words, he's fitting the infrastructure to the people who can do it, not.
So it's just a job creation mindset.
Right. There's a job.
Totally. I mean, and I think that's. I think that's the challenge, and I think
It takes people to lay fiber, baby.
Well,
probably takes more than. I mean, but would fiber be all that you would lay? I mean, is it just
no? It's true.
digging trenches?
We have quite a bit of fiber too, but okay.
So they're not appealing to There was appealing to that group. If you look at his website today, I didn't look at a website, but my guys told me the website repeated the thing about. We're going to get to that, I'm sure, in the conversation here about renegotiating after priority 1 the next 100 days, the first 100 days. You look at what he said right now, renegotiating after, get out of TPP, and I think there's the third one is also big.
I mean, other trade ones?
The trade ones. There's another one that has the trade ones, and I forgot that. Sorry, but probably something to do with the WTO and stuff like that. But he wants to renegotiate deals. That's been. Oh no, the third one was to declare China is a currency manipulator. Yeah, that was. That's an interesting. That's going to be interesting. Those are the three. Well, they're forcing China to reopen the deal. The TPP part of it, China will like, and the other one, China won't, of course. But
because the TPP was set up against China. I mean, it was set up to create a counterweight, right?
It was set up as part of. This is arguable. My view is set up as part of the containment strategy. If you're pro TPP, you will say is to raise the standard that included labor law and environmental criteria. So you could say that. Anyway, the net of that, I like to answer. I would like to piggyback around Tony's comments. I think that, in my view, the next 4 years, if there's not 8, but there's 4, a lot of the tech industry stuff and the infrastructure that we talk about, communication infrastructure, now I'm talking about cybersecurity and stuff, it's going to happen. I think it's going to happen underneath him a lot faster because he never deals with, like the global concept of things or a framework. He deals with like a business deal. It's like me at the end of the quarter, I'm dealing with deals. I'm going to deal with 500 deals, and I wanted to see those deals. That doesn't mean it's bad. I'm just saying it. Now, what the problem is over a period of time, if you don't watch out, these deals completely it's not collectively working together. There's no framework. So maybe the next president will come in and say, we're going to build efficiency, effectiveness, we're going to share data, we're going to blah, 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 and that will be framework. That's politics. You go one side and then come back the other side. So anyway, the point is, I actually think that at least his party, his team around him, is against regulations. He's more like, just get the instant gratification. Let's get the deal done. And so, and I know enough that they are serious about cybersecurity. So.
It's interesting, in the magazine that you all got, I hope, that we produced in conjunction with this conference, we did have a spread toward the back where we asked a number of people in our community, what are the top tech-related issues for the next administration, regardless who it is. And the number one response was cybersecurity. Focus on cybersecurity. It came in a lot of different forms. If you look on that page, you'll see what I'm talking about. There's other issues, but that's a key one. And it is something that he has talked a lot about, although he always calls it cyber. He just calls it cyber, and you sort of wonder when he says, we've got to put money into cyber, okay, I guess he means cybersecurity. I don't think he's ever said cybersecurity. He just says cyber all the time. But so that could be a good thing, though, right? I mean, we need to do that. I mean, I asked Tony in the green room if I could, can I tell that story? I said, is it possible, since we did hear talk that Putin was trying to meddle in the U.S. electoral system, that there was an effect, since even the Trump campaign didn't expect to win? And Tony said, what did you say?
Well, I think based on everything we've seen, there's zero chance there was any impact or any significant meddling in the actual election itself. We had monitors all over the place. We saw examples of sort of garden variety, hackers doing things in various places, but nothing that of even a fraction of a scale that could have any impact on it.
But given the position you're in the U.S. government, what level of priority do you put cybersecurity protections in the scale of things that we need to be focusing on?
Well, it's huge, but I think people misunderstand the nature of the problem a little bit. So let me just give you a couple of facts. The U.S. federal government spends about $85 billion a year on technology, supporting the missions of all the agencies of the federal government. More than 80% of that is spent on just keeping the lights on, just keeping stuff going. I went to 3 significant vendors, think compute, storage, and networking, a few months ago and asked them, tell me what dollar amount is going end of life of the stuff you've sold the federal government in the next 3 years. Collectively, they came back and said $7.5 billion goes end of life, meaning no spare parts, no patches, no support, nothing. That doesn't include software, that doesn't include stuff that's already gone end of life. We have 40-year-old, 30-year-old, 25-year-old technology doing the heavy lifting in the federal government. So of that 80% that we spend on maintenance, it's inefficient, and the 39 or so, the money that we spend on cybersecurity is airbagging and bubble wrapping old stuff. And so to really solve the cybersecurity problem, what you have to do is go back to, you know, a better design in the first place, upgrading and replacing and getting to a more modern platform in some way or another. Those are the challenges that the next president's going to have. So you can say, I'm going to go fix cyber, I'm going to hire, you know, a bazillion people and so on, but if you don't go after this legacy installed base, it's a fundamentally
But that will go back to the point you made earlier. In order, the only way you could make that happen is to replace systems that eventually will disconnect with each other.
Yeah.
At least for the short term. And I mean that's just a strategy question, whether that's acceptable.
Well, there's another thing too, which is, and I fault my own team and the CIOs in the federal government. We have not done a good job of saying to Congress, here's the size of the problem. You know, here's how big it is, and here's what we could do to go fix it over time. We've run around, looked at our shoes, said, ooh, it's old, you know, and so on. But we've never dimensionalized it in a way to create a demand signal to say, here it is, serve it up on a platter. Now there's a choice about what you can do to fix it. So we have a bill in Congress right now that's passed the House, bipartisan bill, create $3 billion fund where you can go take a loan out if you're a federal agency and use that to start the replacement and upgrade modernization. And the only thing that's different about this is you have to pay it back. So once you get the savings, then you pay it back, and that fund can be used to go fund the next set of stuff. Got bipartisan support. I'm hoping it passes. But we got to get on the journey.
It's an interesting idea.
David, I want to offer something that, I mean, I think as you know, I'm an eternal optimist. I wouldn't be an entrepreneur if I wasn't. But I want to raise an issue that maybe, you know, there is a sense that we can think that no matter what happens in this election, there's some fundamentals of technology and what we do and what's going to happen that are going to go forward. I'd like to suggest maybe there's something bigger that's happened here that we may not be paying as attention to, and that it may not be as it happens. And I think that's how we looked at this election, was a sense that sort of what happens today is what we saw happening yesterday, just sort of happening in a serial process. You know, one of the things, and you and I had talked about this, I stumbled on a book 6 months ago, somewhat accidentally, which is called The End of Economic Man, The Origins of Totalitarianism. Anyone know this book? This was the first book that Peter Drucker wrote. He wrote it as a 22-year-old man first. It didn't actually get published until he was 26 or 27. He was living in Italy in the early 30s. He was a journalist. And there was this person, Mussolini, who everyone sort of thought was a bit nutcase, and he didn't take him that seriously, and they thought there was some unique circumstances, just some angry people, and he gets elected. And he writes about this. He said, no, there's a really fundamental social, political, structural, economic issues going on here that this is a manifestation of, and we need to understand the causes, and you're missing it. This isn't just something that's going to go away in 4 or 8 years. This is something big. They wouldn't publish it. He's Austrian, so of course in 33, 34, he goes to Germany. And he's in the meeting halls when Hitler and Goebbels are speaking. And he's listening to them. And he's like, wait, I'm telling exactly, this is what I just was writing. And so he writes it a more complete book. And he tries to get it published, and no one will publish it. Because they're like, you're taking an extreme position that there's some fundamental structural problem in Europe. and that's not the case. We just have two unusual circumstances, nationalist issues. This is not a structural continental issue, societal issue. And then you have the Munich Accords, and he gets it published. And the first person to review it is Winston Churchill, who realizes how powerful this is. And it's funny, I'm just going to read something on the table of contents, but I read it accidentally 6 months ago. And you have things like the despair of the masses, the return of the demons, these are chapters, the totalitarian miracle, miracle or mirage. And my point is that if you read this book, and this is like, it was his formative book, you realize he saw structural things of what the media didn't do and didn't take seriously. The prognosticators couldn't understand. The business, the church had not held there. And I would argue that there is something bigger here in this disconnect that's actually going to prevent us from having this structure, rule of law, fact-based empiricism that we've been dependent on. And we have to, I think we really, the tech industry, have to take that seriously.
Well, that is really useful because, I have to ask, especially in conjunction with the analysis of last night, people are talking about, Marine Le Pen really may be the next Prime Minister of France. So this is a global thing. There's a global thing going on that is a change in psychology of the mass of developed country citizens. And we have to wrestle with what it means. And it is so fascinating to me that it's happening exactly at the moment when smartphones are penetrating almost universally in these societies, right? There is a new empowerment of the individual that I've been writing about and talking about ever since before we even started Techonomy. And exactly the connection between the two, I scratch my head about, except that the filter bubble is one explanation. The ability of people to aggregate with people of like-minded views that they didn't know that they could connect with before, didn't realize the numbers, the ability to be reaffirmed in what would formerly been seen to be a minority point of view, et cetera, et cetera. But what I guess I continue to come back to go to my own opening comments, opening of the conference and opening of the session is, how, maybe this is what I'm really interested in here. I don't even know why we had this session, but how can we use the reality of where we are with technology to help us in this moment? And I don't mean help disenfranchise these people or to try to tell them they're wrong, but what can we accomplish that will make people more satisfied with their lives? Because actually, lives are better in all these countries. That's the bizarre reality.
But they need a bigger unifying mission, I think. I mean, you can say lives are better economically, I think there's no question. I mean, my little hometown, Walmart's the largest employer. The cost of living has gone down so much that they aren't making that much money. They don't have to work that much. But they all can buy TVs because they can get them for $139 flat panel, 40 inch. And I think that there's a lot of the non-economic, the dignity issues. I mean, my hometown used to have this sign, All-American City under John F. Kennedy, and they made things and they felt proud, and they don't feel proud anymore. And they're not part of this. They can't go to Code Academy. They're not part of this where we go next. I totally randomly also I ended up flying between Orlando and LA with a former astronaut who I didn't realize he was one of those until by the time we landed. And he talked about the problem with the beauty of Apollo and having a big mission and exploration and discovering how different that was for him with the space shuttle program, which was about a business and driving trucks, which is why they had accidents, because it was about business. And I think too much of what we do in our tech today, for most of them, it's about our business. It's not about them. And something like Apollo, and that's why I would say I think the infrastructure opportunity it's not necessarily about the highways. It needs to be about our NASA missions and our Apollo missions, something that's bigger and galvanizing
and the tech industry needs to sort of take that on. And all of industry needs to take it on.
And realize they're never going to send them to Code Academy to first 8 weeks and then bring them into their companies. They're going to have to find some other ways to go to them.
I mean, okay, John, what were you going to say?
I'm gonna argue that I don't think most people think we're better off.
No, they don't, but we are.
We are.
Empirically, we are.
Maybe
Ask them.
Here's the
they
thing
say
that I
we're
hear.
not, clearly.
I hear from even people who are very developed cities like Japan and China and all that. The people that are starting out are unable. The gap of the have and have not. Is so huge. They're unable to see themselves being in the
gap is
hopeful state. So the fact that you give them a flat panel TV for $139 to watch football it's not the most assuring thing in life. They don't feel there's that hope of moving forward, working hard that I could attain.
Yeah.
Part of them because the society, part of them is the negative of the globalization. I mean, that's part of that.
Well,
I mean,
it's another thing too. It's really, what you're talking about is the vanishing middle class. So, and automation and digitization is going to wipe out even more of that. So if you're a clerk working in an insurance company or a medical technician, we heard a talk about getting rid of lawyers and so on. Those are the jobs that are disappearing and disappearing fast.
I just want to put a big, bright red arrow on the word Dave used, though, dignity. I think that is a very insightful thought because people's lives are longer. There actually are objectively healthier standard of living is objectively better, but they lack dignity. And the question is, how can they regain dignity? I don't know. That to me is a key question.
Yeah, I think this, I mean,
A sense that, and maybe it's a question for Mark Zuckerberg tomorrow. I don't know.
Some sense of control and actually in what they do, in some sense of like, I mean, I do think that the sense that they can ascend and go forward. You know, one of the things that's interesting, because after this book, I had, of course, to read other Drucker books, and I read then The Concept of the Corporation about General Motors. And I found fascinating that in the 1940s, mid-40s, Drucker wrote about the living wage. And he said, we have this really big problem with the decentralized corporation that we brought cost accounting into. And he said, cost accounting, he says this in 46, is going to be the destruction of the balance between management and labor. And he said, because to management, cost accounting has taken it down to the wage unit hour cost. And to labor is a life. Like I have, and it's living wage. What do I need to feed my family this year? And then how do I deal with catastrophic problem? And then third, if I have a chance to participate, which was the pension fund. And of course, we blew up the pension funds with, you know, the Raiders in the 80s and Wall Street. And so they lost that piece. They lost the catastrophic. And they don't even get, in Walmart, make sure they don't work more than 29 and a half hours and have to go on the health plan. And so I think those are the core structural issues that no one sits and thinks about, like, is cost accounting the best way to be, you know, running businesses if, in fact, we look at labor as no different than cost?
Well, maybe we're not factoring in all the externalities into our accounting. I mean, maybe that's a big sort of philosophical issue. You get into that with environmental issues, and maybe we need to start entering into our economic dialogue, but I wouldn't expect Wall Street to be excited about that anytime soon. But I would like to broaden this to any of you. I don't know if we can get the house lights up a tiny bit, but I would love to hear anybody make a comment. It doesn't have to be a question. I see a hand back there, and then we'll get up here. Can we get the mic back there to that person? Please. And that's right there in the sofa there. Thank you. Identify yourself, please.
Hi, my name is John from Hyundai Motors. And I think if we're all in this room techonomists, my conclusion is that techonomy has failed us, or technology has failed us.
Please, thank you.
Because we assume, and David, in your question, your struggle, we're assuming that technology is somehow a panacea of sorts.
Well, I don't call it a panacea, but go on.
Okay, I'm being extreme, to make it extreme. So I think I like Dave's viewpoints of that. The question of dignity, right? Why is it that technology? Why do we are thinking about is technology going to solve this problem, right? I think we have, as techonomists, I think we have to become more aware of the limitations of technology, right? It has limits, really fundamental limits, right? And so maybe to Dave's question, or your question about dignity, maybe it's a point that maybe technology is not the answer, right? And I think we have to kind of have that kind of conversation too, right? Not struggle why.
What is the answer, though? I mean,
the answer is love,
there is
right?
An answer, I don't know.
I mean, the answer is love, right? Love one another, right? That is the answer, right? And technology is not love.
I think like you pointed out, the last thing, our economic value systems probably is the only possible answer, because the technology enables a lot of things happen faster, lower a lot of barriers, but eventually everybody's about the same, in terms of knowledge and so forth. Then the question is, how do you stand out If everybody's going to try to stand out, there only a few will stand out, and there the disparity happened. Once you have the disparity, then you have the dignity issue, the masses, because they no longer control their future. And to add to the insult to this is we all live longer.
But, you know,
so I think the economic, I don't want to, I'm not advocating communism, but obviously, or socialism, but somewhere along the line, we have to keep the society masses feeling positive going forward.
I know, but forgive me for pointing this out, John, but you're one of those highly paid CEOs.
Not highly paid, but okay.
Well, maybe not as highly paid as you would like, but that's part of the, you know, the point is, you know, it's very hard for each of us to adjust our own positioning in this reality, right?
But I think if we recognize, I mean, I think one of the things we can be thinking about, and there are places technology can help, I think, you know, we clearly do have a failure of some of the institutions that provided that dignity or comfort decades ago that weren't today. I mean, we had, let's say, you know, what was then more the mainstream churches and sort of a more stability and, you know, and sort of a civic notion. You know, people move much more, and so there's like, you know, there's less of sort of a stability there. We had a bit more stability in the media. Now, as a former newspaper lawyer, I'll say, you know, they also were monopolists, and they had one single point of view, and they were good at driving it, but there was a consistent local point of view. We don't have that sort of local anchoring media. So I'm not wistful for some notion that it's going to come back, but I do think that there are ways that we can find ways to build community structures. I think with Mark Zuckerberg coming, it'd be a great kind of thing to be talking to him about. What kind of community structures can we build that have been more virtual, that can give people that kind of support, for example, that they don't feel now? I mean, certainly we find help group and focus groups and things like, but I don't know those.
So in that sense, do you disagree with what this guy said over here?
No, yeah, I do disagree. Actually, I think there's a requirement in technology to help solve it. I don't think it is a panacea or a silver bullet. So
But there are tools that we might be able to think of that could help address some of these problems.
I mean, I would
even though who could argue love is the answer?
Yeah.
I mean, that's inarguable.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
yeah, but I mean, the thing is, I would just look at like one thing, which is, you know, there was a very low level of awareness that this was potentially going to happen. I certainly did not expect it. So be clear what I'm going to say. I did not expect it, but my mother expected it. I mean, it was no question. I mean, she has been sick about this for weeks and weeks. Of course it's going to happen because she could feel it. On my Facebook page, it was pretty obvious. That half of my Facebook page that no one here would want to see. None of my New York friends could see. That was racist and nasty. And my wife is Mexican. My children are Mexican. It's pretty offensive to me. But and these are college graduates and former soldiers and officers, military officers. Vitriol was really strong. But people didn't see it, because we only wanted to look at the things we were looking at. We can use technology to surface and be aware of.
Is the mic? You have the mic? Can we get the mic here? You got one coming. Here we go. Identify yourself.
Hi, Robert Klitzman from Columbia University. That was great. I'm wondering, for the Trump voters who were saying, I want a job, who didn't go to college and they're in their 40s, so they're not about to go back to college necessarily, has the tech economy left them behind? In other words, what kind of jobs are they going to be able to get? If Trump called you in and said, okay, I promised jobs to these folks, these guys, what would you say? Or should we be engaging them? Have we failed them?
Well, we better offer them offer jobs driving cars or trucks, because we're going to lose now, I think, the next 3.5 years, 1.5 million driving jobs, or 4 years, 5 years, some number, which is the largest single employment of white males outside of the government today, older white males.
We're going to have self-driving cars.
That's my point. That's my point. We're going to see an absolute certain displacement of 1 million plus of them over the next 3, 4, 5 years.
That is a projection, but it is also the case right now that there are 65,000 unfilled driving jobs in the United States. Even though I'm not disagreeing, those jobs may go away, we do not have an excess of people wanting to drive right now. So even though it's 2.5, 3 million people, it's the single biggest job category in the country, I think, or something like that.
I think that is why that he's trying to create jobs that most people can do. And this is why he said what he said last night or this morning. And this is why he's attacking all the trade deals, because he's trying to change all the trade deals are the economic drivers where, well, you could make it cheaper, I'll let you make it, I'll buy it cheaper, and everybody got to enjoy it. Well, that's true, but the people who know how to make this no longer have the needs to make it. So you know, it's a little bit of the old big deal way, you know, and I don't speak for that.
I think
nothing
there's
to do
another
with it.
problem, actually, which is if you take the, you know, out-of-work coal miner, what else is that person going to do? You know, they're probably not going to move away from their town in Pennsylvania and get retrained to go do something else. I think the problem at a larger scale is partly because of technology, change is happening at a much faster pace than society can absorb those changes. If you look at how long the Industrial Revolution took place, or any of the other sort of big cataclysmic revolutions we've had, they occurred in a time frame that allowed society to adjust. Maybe not completely, but over time, over generations. And this revolution is happening much faster. And it's not just the tech revolution, it's the energy revolution that's aided by technology. It's a whole bunch of things aided by technology that have fundamentally changed where jobs are and how people live, and it's happened fast. So that's created a void, and it's economic dignity, it's social dignity, it's a whole bunch of things sort of wrapped into one.
So there's really a disorientation that has set in because of the pace of change on top of the loss of dignity. But I would continue to assert that all industry, but especially the one that I happen to know best, technology, probably needs to be thinking about that in its product design more than they do. And, you know, we just keep coming out with new stuff, and people embrace it, and they, you know, everybody here has a smartphone, and there's probably, you know, half the people in the room may have iPhone 7s already, but we are in this room as well disoriented. There's no question. And if we were living in, you know, Dave's hometown,
Clearfield, Pennsylvania.
what's it called?
Clearfield, Pennsylvania.
Clearfield?
Clearfield.
Clear.
Chinkalacamoose, that's what the Indian name was first.
Well, anyway, we probably feel it more there.
Question to your right first, David.
Okay, where was that? Over here. Thanks.
Thanks, Jody Westby. So I am from Kansas and Nebraska. And over the last year, as my mother was dying, I spent a number of times driving completely across the state of Kansas and the state of Nebraska. There are entire communities living in poverty. Stores are closed, houses have no paint, yards are filled with junk. People have no hope. Women are committing suicide at double-digit rates. Life expectancy's gone down. So why isn't our technology industry looking at building support centers there, call centers there, you know, coding there, other types of technology? And I know you didn't mean it, but it sounds like you guys are saying, oh, these people, all they can do are blue-collar work. And there's very good intellectual capital there. They have good schools. People want to live there. They're in our time zone. They're in our legal zone. And so technology's missing this. And there's a whole swath of that red, which is filled with these states. And also, how is it that in this connected world, our mainstream media completely missed what happened last night? There's something really missing.
I would just have to say, I think it's super healthy that questions like that are being asked. Did you have the mic for a reason there?
I did.
Okay, go ahead. And
So when you're talking,
we got a bunch of time,
So,
so
real,
don't
real quick,
worry.
so when you're talking about technology and you're talking about why it doesn't address some of the workers who don't have jobs today, you look back to what happened with the unions. So in the 70s, the unions quit applying apprenticeship programs, and they guaranteed their jobs to the older workers. So what happened is all the younger workers in all the trades basically disappeared from the U.S. industrial landscape. And so what you had is they became political action committees. And so by that, all the people that were there coming off of FDR's programs to actually protect the workers that were doing industrial work, whether it was manufacturing and some kind of assembly, all those skills just eroded as people became older and older. There was no one there to replace them. So we've done a terrible job. If you think about economic policy, you think about technology policy, we've done a terrible job of providing institutions whose job is to make sure people have those skills. And that's actually partly our fault. That's partly the people in this room's fault, because we make the assumption, well, we'll just replace those people with more technology. And that's what you're sowing, that's what you're reaping today.
Yeah, I would reiterate, these are the right questions to be asking. Okay, I'll get over here. Hey, right over there. I want to be the one picking the people, by the way. Forgive me. Lex.
Hi, I'm Lex. So I have a kind of a more pessimistic point of view, which is...
What do you do, by the way, Lex, real fast?
I'm a fintech entrepreneur, blockchain, artificial intelligence, all that cool stuff. So I've been, and my company automated financial advisors. So that's a human task. It's an improvement for the consumer. It's job loss in the industry. So the way I see it, there will just be less and less and less human jobs, whether it's for folks who don't have a college degree or folks who have a college degree, for folks who don't have a PhD in artificial intelligence, and so we get further and further into this issue where just structurally, based on the tech that we have less human jobs. And so going to the issue of dignity, how can we separate the idea of economic reward, of having a good life, of being able to participate in the economy and the spoils of the life, and then on the other hand, this idea of craft, right? So humans like craft. They like to create something, to be good at it, to strive towards it, and that's where dignity comes from. That's where identity and mission comes from. And today these things are coupled, right? I'm a carpenter, or I'm a coal miner, or I'm a developer, or I'm a PhD AI scientist, right? These are identities. And as these things get broken by where technology is taking us, instead of just trying to smush them together, I think we have to think of how they can be unbundled.
Okay, I want to get as many voices on the table as possible. Let's go right here. Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
can
Priya
hold it,
Kumar
I wanna
from the
point.
University of Maryland and a project called Ranking Digital Rights. I really appreciate, Dave, your perspective on what you're seeing on your Facebook feed and these sort of disconnects that we're all feeling. And sort of in that vein, I mean, Pew Research has shown that a majority of people are now getting their news from social media. So my questions focus on what responsibility do these types of technology companies like Facebook, who bends itself over backwards to say that it doesn't have anything to do with news, it doesn't affect the news, what responsibility do the technology companies themselves have to acknowledge that they are not neutral, they are operating in a system, and then what mechanisms can we then build outside of technology companies to then hold them accountable?
Could I just quickly ask you, because I want to get as many voices on the table as possible, what would you have them take more responsibility for? I'm just curious.
Pardon, I missed the beginning.
What would you have them take more responsibility for? I'm just curious from your point of view.
I mean, I think for Facebook's case, the algorithm that they have, for example, the newsfeed, determines what people see. People need to be aware of that. I think there's increasing awareness of that, but a lot of people don't understand how the algorithm works. And so, before somebody could pick up a newspaper and you would see the stack of newspapers and you would know that the person next to you when they picked up the newspaper saw the same thing. And it's not like that anymore. So one, accountability for the way that algorithms are affecting what people are seeing is just one example.
That actually is going to come up tomorrow, by the way. Can we get the mic here? And I'm glad
Hey, so I do not know how many
really
people.
identify yourself.
Oh, Julio Tino, with Northwestern University. I think I know what the main issue is at the root of many things, but I do not know how to make it work. The reality is, even if you are showing the algorithm to people, most people won't understand it. The issue is education, okay? Information, education, having this Rockwellian view of manufacturing coming from China to the US, unless you kill every robot out there, that will not happen. So what you have is these things that are out of phase. They used to kind of be very tightly coordinated, and it has to do with the issues of future of work. If something is high volume and repetitive, it will disappear. The discovery phase is gone from law firms. It's all outsourced. So the question is, without going ballistic and promising that college education will be free, debt-free for everybody. You need education that actually accomplishes something. I don't know if we should imitate Germany on this, but yeah, so we have to do whatever we have to do to kind of try to keep things more in phase. Infrastructure jobs are things in which probably the skills are semi-ready, but we shouldn't try to go for things that look good on paper, like the education in Harvard will be free, or is free already, or in the top universities. We should work on something that are skills that people can actually use, and actually the dignity issue will be attached to actually creating something that people can touch and see.
Great, thank you. Here, and okay, we'll get a, there. Go ahead.
Galen Buckwalter. I'm a research psychologist. A couple of things I don't think are on the table yet that would change this discussion. First thing, 2008. That was a sea change for middle-class America. And I think we all know that the massive amount of jobs that were lost, how corporations took that time to, not replace all those people and go with the profits. That loss of jobs put an inordinate amount of stress on middle-class America. Stress is a game changer to the human system. It literally changes how we think. We go into a state of denial, avoidance. Everything we do when we're stressed out is the exact wrong thing to get out of that mindset. It totally sets us up for the authoritative personality, which I think, and I'd written an article in Techonomy a few months back, arguing that this stress is a huge predictor of Trump. These people need a strong man right now, and we're not picking it up. Third point, technology is capable of doing so much better in relating to people. As most social media exists now, as most AI programs are optimizing nothing but click behavior. You like, you don't like, you buy something, so you get ads for, shoes for days. That does nothing to enhance human existence. The basics that we have to start with in technology is to understand people as, as empirically as we can, understand their personality, their values, and start relating to them as more than just a consumer.
Speaking as a psychologist, which is what he is. Back here, identify yourself.
My name is Peter Marks. I'm with General Electric. I'm the former Chief Technology Officer for a large city, Los Angeles. And I'll just say the following, which is that 1,000 years ago, I worked on a product called QuickTime, which I'm sure a number of people have heard of. And my father, a film editor, soon found himself without a job. And I have worked in the private world for a long, long time, in the tech world. I've worked in healthcare, I've worked in media, I've worked in lots and lots of video games, cities, lots of stuff. And one of the things that we all have, and I think Tony would agree with this, is that we have forced a lot of change on the world. And there have been a lot of people who've been left behind. And we have, sitting here in Half Moon Bay, we haven't taken responsibility for the displacement that all of this technological change has caused. The title is "We're Not in Kansas Anymore." We've never been in Kansas.
Yeah, and don't tell them about the hotel we're having this conference in either.
Yeah, exactly.
Time for two more questions.
I'd love to hear Shuni again on this topic, so let's get the mic to Shuni. Do we have a mic to get over here? Oh,
yes.
Fast-running mic handler. Thank you so much.
I actually have a question for John or people in the audience. What do you think could the result of U.S. election sending the message to the rest of the world? And specifically for China, one thing, as you know, John, probably, Chinese people following the election very, very closely. And one thing strikes me most is it reminds us we're living in a very user-generated world. How along the election, the media predictions all around being wrong. Does this inspire democracy in China, or this is make the government worry? So I want to hear some of your opinion.
Yeah, John, let's hear you from that.
Yeah, I was surprised when I went to China how closely even the media followed. You turn on the news, the news are talking about it. There's CCTV4 and about Trump versus Hillary, and I was quite surprised. And I think this surprise election results is something that at least China will like. And the reason is, with Hillary, there has always been a framework of engagement. Some people call it containment programs, but whatever you want to call it. And it was actually quite structural. And anywhere from the repivoting and the TPP and the Taiwan/Japan coalition, the six-party talks, if you could see that has been a very systematic program to manage the growth, let's say, I'm trying to use the right word, so manage the growth of China. And then the Chinese people, or the Chinese government actually does not like that management. So I think Trump brings an opportunity to reopen all the dialogue of the rules of engagement, whether we're still going to have a SCND, whether we're going to, that I think is now all on the table. I think now there's no preconceived notion, because had Hillary been the president, the State Department will do exactly what it has been doing in the last 12, 16 years. And so I'm hopeful. Now, of course, I think the president-elect in this case will probably put some very harsh opening bid, let's call it. I think both sides will know these are the opening bid. I heard that from China. They know it's an opening bid, meaning that the ending bid may be quite different. So, and this is going to happen, in very short order, in my opinion. And
Time.
Really, really cool.
Someone waiting a long time here in the back, if you don't mind.
Okay. Sure, go ahead. Is that Charlie?
Yeah, Charlie.
Okay, go ahead. If it's Charlie, it's okay.
Hi, thank you. It's Charlie from Surface Media. Thank you for having me. This is an amazing, amazing event. I flew cross country from Brooklyn, from New York, and I got the news about Trump sort of just before I got on the plane. So I didn't get a chance to really process it before the captain said, turn your Wi-Fi off, right? So I sat on the plane for 4 hours and landed in San Francisco, and immediately I was like, what's going on? What's going on? And there's another event, another tech event, a big tech event that's happening right now on the other side of the world. And I think it's wrapping up today or tomorrow. But anyway, Robert Scoble posted on Facebook, oh, the tech industry, the tech executive, they're outraged. Everyone's angry, this emotion, and everyone is entitled to that. I don't take that from anyone. I feel it myself. But I found that the next words that he said or that he posted made me it practically brought me to tears. He quoted Dave McClure, I think it is, and a couple of other executives at the event, who Dave McClure actually said, if you're not angry, you're a son of a bitch. This is an outrage. And it was all this anger that he was expressing, rightfully so. But at the same time, I thought to myself, well, where the hell have you been? I've been feeling this anger. And I know black people and women and other minorities in tech have been feeling this for years. I've had more conversations about how disgusted we are that there's a pie that only a few get to eat from while the rest of us get crumbs. And that much is a fact. And then I said to myself, now I'm surprised at my own anger, because I work in tech, I support it, I work with startups, I have a startup. I get it. But at the same time, you cannot be outraged by a man whose policies you think are narrow, when by the way that you're practicing in your industry, you're actually doing the thing that he's saying. You're not giving minorities those opportunities, and you're not giving women those opportunities either. So I just think the anger is actually making it worse. And I've spoken to a few women, I've spoken to a few minorities, I've spoken to a few people today, and they are angry at the anger from tech executives today. It's almost insulting. And I'm not saying you don't have the right, I'm just saying it's a deeper discussion that we need to have. And truth be told, we've been angry for a long time. Where have you been?
Thank you, Shar. I'm sorry. We have time for one more, and because of Shuni's question, I asked one of the many non-Americans who's in the room, who happens to be someone I know, Christian from Germany. Please identify yourself and say whatever you want to say.
I just have a small thing to add also. I'm from Germany. I'm a book publisher. But since quite a few years, I'm working in a hospice. And I just want to add something to the dignity thing. Maybe it's not tech, in the end, who helps people regain dignity. We should also have a look at that. I mean, tech helps with everything and is also challenging everything, but maybe we look more and more to what Galen said, also to the psychological or human side. So what would it be where we could really help people regain dignity by giving other people dignity? The dying, the elderly. So more and more invest also in human relationships that just cannot be replaced, at least for the next 4 years, by tech.
Well, thank you for that. And I will say, we have to wrap, but I think a very large number of things said here are much more constructive than anger. I think this is the kind of discussion we have to be having. I hope it continues for years and years. I hope it continues indefinitely. I thank the three of you for helping us get this thing going and for being here and launching the conference. So thank you, John, Dave, Tony. Thanks so much.